the Benedict option, I feel like, comes down to like, hey, see that problem over there? Hey, maybe the church can solve that. I've never heard someone articulate a criticism that matches what Dreher was saying. Like,
Yes.
like they actually say like the criticisms either fall into the category of just being sort of vague and not really, making any clear points with good alternatives, like you're saying, or, and the majority of them I feel like fall into, they just like totally mischaracterize what he's saying at all.
Welcome to the Circle Dwellers podcast, a production of the Protestant Monastic Order of Life Mission Fellowship. This is a show about living out the gospel in an intentional Christian community. My name is Matt Krell. You're back here with Timothy Krell. And today we wanted to talk about a book that we all very much like and have read and appreciate. And that is the Benedict Option by Rod Dreher. And I think one of the things that's been very useful about this book is that it made intentional Christian communities, it put them in the public consciousness of the Christian sphere more. So like shortly after that book came out, we would go to different conferences and talk about who we are with people, and they would often tell us, oh wait, so that's the Benedict option, right? So yeah, so what we wanted to do is talk about it, what Dreher goes over in that book, as well as kind of give our thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we should just kind of, you want to give like a high level overview of what the Benedict option is about? Or
Sure. Yeah. So it's entirely possible we're going to get some details wrong, just so you know. So you really should just go read the book yourself. I did read this fairly recently, so if my memory's fresh, it should be okay, but we'll see. Anyway, yeah, so basically the Benedict option is a term that Dreher coined, and it refers to Saint Benedict, the Catholic saint who started the Benedictine order, which, as many people may know, was the biggest monastic order in medieval Europe, and it's still going today. I don't think there's that many Benedictines here in the States, but I do believe there's a couple of communities here. Anyway, so what he's arguing is that just as the Benedictines of that era had a way of preserving culture and the Christian sphere and universe in that extremely dark time, those what some historians might colloquially call the Dark Ages. Dreher is suggesting that we start the same sort of thing in our own context here to act as a bulwark against the degrading effects of secularism. Now, that maybe sound a little bit surprising because I think a lot of Christians, maybe this is too bold to say it this way, but a lot of Christians don't necessarily have a big a distinction between the Christian understanding, Christian culture, and then also the wider culture, which is, I think, probably one of our biggest criticisms we may have of other churches, which is a lot of times the gospel is presented as like the American dream with a Jesus overlay on top of it. So what Dreher's saying is like we need to take a much, much more radical step. The forces of secularism and atheism and other cultures, they're squeezing us into their mold, like Paul would put it in his letters. And the only way we're going to survive as an American church is if we basically bandy together and form these very tight-knit groups focused on creating a distinct Christian culture. And what he does through the book is go over lots of different examples of that. He goes over to Europe, finds, of course, actual Benedictines, talks to them about this. He finds other, like, essentially small towns of Christians who got together to try to find, to build a school and such. So he goes over lots and lots of different examples of this same thing happening all over Europe and starting to happen in America, and telling people that unless you do this, where you intentionally created an alternative culture, it's not possible for you to live out the Christian gospel in an effective manner. Like the forces of secularism is just going to destroy you, because there's the amount of pressures of career and of family and such. It's simply too strong. And the fact that many churches themselves don't have a particularly strong internal culture. Many people aren't getting discipled. Oftentimes we don't help our brothers and sisters who are in, monetary need. That's because we're working under an assumption, a structural assumption that isn't capable of surviving in this culture. In a culture where America was more deliberately Christian, like it used to be, I'm going to say the 50s, but that's not even technically correct. Like much earlier than that, and even late 1800s, that may have been possible, but now it's definitely not that way. We're definitely not in a culture that deliberately recognizes the Christian values. And so the only thing we can do that's going to withstand that is to build small bands of Christians who hold each other accountable, possibly practice some kind of economic sharing, but what type we don't know. But it has to be something close to what looked like the monastic orders of the Middle Ages.
Yeah, but because, well, a lot of people disagree with Rod Dreher and push against, like his book and everything, and we'll talk about those. But when it comes down to it, like I feel like the majority of people actually agree with the problem that he's presenting in the book, which is that we're not in a great state as a society right now. Like, a lot of people will call it the meaning crisis, or they'll call it, they talk about loneliness, and just that there's a complete breakdown of, the little platoons that,
de Tocqueville, is that, I think, that?
No. Oh, Kate's gonna be upset now. I can't. Why am I totally? I just had his name on the tip of my tongue. The British philosopher.
Scruton? No, Burke.
No, Edmund Burke.
Edmund Burke. Yeah.
So yeah, Edmund Burke is, talks about the little platoons, and this idea that society is best organized around those, and these kind of small voluntary associations between people, and that's a better structure for society versus just between the individual person and the state, right? Yeah. So a lot of people kind of recognize that like our modern society has broken that down quite a bit, and there aren't those little platoons in society that are kind of holding everything together. You hear it a lot in the idea of, everything becoming really political and, very divided in terms of sentiments and stuff. This idea that there isn't a lot of local communities. Even things like people lamenting urban sprawl and, all these different kinds of things. Just that there's something that we've lost in everything becoming modern. Just in terms of having cars, like we talked about in a previous episode, all these different new technologies have made people much more independent of each other, and free to go and do whatever they want. But the consequence of it is that there's no rootedness in local communities and things. So I think everyone kind of recognizes that, that's a problem. To what degree or why it's a problem or all those different things can be different. but it's really obvious that it's a problem. You know, like with the loneliness and with everything, the feeling that like social media doesn't actually provide, you know, anything like true community and stuff. And people, you know, there's modern news stories now of you know, people like Sam Altman talking about, oh, maybe AI or no, I think Mark Zuckerberg and like Facebook talking about, you know, oh, you know, AI could maybe solve the loneliness thing because you can have a personality that you talk to, and it's like, oh yeah, that sounds dystopian. That'd be terrible.
That meme that I frequently post about the torment nexus that just shows up all the time now. It's like every day at this point. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is post someone did on Twitter a couple years ago saying, sci-fi author, I wrote the book, I wrote this the torment nexus as a cautionary tale, and then Silicon Valley company, we have finally created the torment nexus from the famous sci-fi book Don't Create the Torment Nexus. It's like I see this every single day. It's some news coming out of like this crazy dystopian idea. Like, guys, these sci-fi books that you grew up with and enjoyed, they're not manuals. You should not be replicating them. Anyway.
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecies.
I know.
So like at a secular level, everyone agrees that like there's definitely something that's lost. We need community and all that. In the Christian level, I think we recognize that even more. And there's this feeling that, you know, we're more connected in society and things. And, you know, the church provided those communities a lot more than they do now. And they do to some degree, you know, but you wouldn't be hearing Christians lamenting this the same way secular people do, which they do, to the degree that they do if the churches were solving that problem, and they're not, right? You know, like it's because like I don't think anyone has the idea of, oh yeah, the general secular society is really messed up and lonely and isolated, but in general, on the whole, the church and the Christian society is doing this great, right? Don't think you generally have that feeling. I don't hear people talking about that.
I don't hear anyone saying that.
I hear most Christians maybe even talk about it more than secularists because they're more aware of the need of that, because the Christian worldview makes that perhaps even more obvious, or definitely more obvious than the secular worldview, although the secular people understand it too. So the question is like, and like ultimately the Benedict option, I feel like, comes down to like, hey, see that problem over there? Hey, maybe the church can solve that. You know, and like that's like, it's not much more radical than that. Like, you know, it's just like, because I feel like ultimately what it comes down to is like, oh, you see that there's a lack of community and you think things are lonely and everything's independent and all that stuff, and you want that solved. Okay, great. Here's what you have to do. You have to form a community. You have to be tightly knit with people and not have that. And like, wait, you mean I have to though? You know, like, well, yeah, that's
how else are you gonna do it?
How else do you get away from the loneliness if you don't do that, right? Like, you have to be a part of that. It's like, well, yeah, but like, I just want to partake of that. I don't want to necessarily be the person to like do the work of making that community, right? And it's like, but that's what community is, you know? It's like saying like, oh, I'd like to really be part of a loving marriage. I don't necessarily want to be the person, like have to be the loving person in the marriage, you know, like, or work on that, or learn what my spouse desires and cares about, and like, you know, figure out how to meet her needs, you know, these different things. Like, I just want to be in a loving relationship, you know? It's not, and I think I feel like too, I think social media kind of makes that whole feeling not obvious, because social media is very much a low commitment kind of thing, where you can go on it and doom scroll all day and it didn't demand anything of you, right? Except you wasting your time. But the you can participate as little or as much as you want, and you can join in a conversation, and then you can reply something quickly to somebody off the cuff without thinking about it very much, and then they can come back with a thoughtful response to your unthoughtful response, and you can just leave them hanging and not say anything back, right? Like that's not considered rude or weird, like it's very little, it demands very little of you. But like true community actually demands a lot from you. that's definition of it, is giving of yourself to other people. So
I like what you're pointing out here, because if you see the Benedict Option and what Dreher talks about as just an answer to the meaning crisis and loneliness crisis and all those things, and then people freak out saying, "No, that can't possibly be right." Well, the response is, "Well, do you have a better idea?" And they don't, right? So like, it's kind of it feels a bit ridiculous.
I haven't necessarily done like a lot of due diligence and like actively trying to see like the best critiques of Dreher's Benedict Option, but I have seen some, and generally like whenever you just hear it vaguely say like, oh, I don't, that's bad, or that's not the right thing or whatever. But I've never heard someone articulate a criticism that matches what Dreher was saying. Like,
Yes.
like they actually say like, the criticisms either fall into the category of just being sort of vague and not really, making any clear points with good alternatives, like you're saying, and the majority of them I feel like fall into, they just characterize totally mischaracterize what he's saying at all. But it's really easy to make straw men, but I really, and so this probably this statement I'm going to make probably verges on that. But I feel like a lot of people, when they make those kind of not very robust arguments, it feels like it's coming from more a intuition that they may not even recognize, which is, oh, this would demand a lot of me. I don't know if I want to do that, and so I will now cognitive dissonance myself into making an argument about it that isn't really clear or straightforward, because the truth is your gut doesn't want to look at that, because it really would mean it would cost you something. It would cost you a lot. It's a lot easy. Like the current state of things in the church on the whole doesn't demand too much of you. And to some people, it probably demands a lot. It's like, wow, I got to give up my Sunday and go on Sunday to do a service,
Right.
But that's really like, and I got a tithe or something. And those are all, yes, that's something more than what you would do. But it doesn't really demand much of you to like really lay down your life for other people. But what Dreher advocates for is forming these small communities, or he says, local communities centered on prayer, traditional values, Christian education, and involving each other really deeply in each other's lives. And he doesn't make a lot of like prescriptions about like what exactly that has to look like. He leaves it fairly vague. I feel like, the high level principles are there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it feels like it's the most gentle, innocuous way of broaching this topic. And even still, people get really worked up over it. Like, I feel like, I don't know. Do you remember? You said you've read the book recently, because it's been a while for
Somewhat
me. But
recently.
does he advocate for any kind of economic sharing at all, or
I don't remember that specifically, but he definitely goes over certain groups that do that.
Like he probably mentions that they do that. I don't feel like I recall him saying like, you've got to do that in order to be the church, or something. Whereas I probably would fall, like I would fall more into the camp of leaning that way, of saying like, I think if you really want to live in the kingdom of God as intended in the scriptures, and also, be a witness to the kingdom of God together as a group, I think you have to incorporate some kind of economic sharing in that. How that plays out, there's a lot of different ways that could, but I think I think I would go strong enough to say, like, I think that's a requirement to really be a church together. But he doesn't say that,
Like, so, I think it basically just amounts to move together and start a school. Like, if you've got to pull something practical, that's like, basically what he said.
And it's just funny because like the responses to it feel so overblown for what he's saying,
The biggest one is like, oh, this is a retreat from the world, right?
Yeah.
You clearly haven't read the book. Sorry, you have not read the book. That's what it tells me. You do not know what he's saying.
Yeah. I've got my little thumbs up thing.
Yeah, is it the Apple thing doing that?
Yeah,
I turned that off on mine.
You can turn it off. Yeah, I don't. It never comes up when you want it to. Like,
it's true.
It's not working. But if you just like do some odd hand gesture, then it happens. What was I even saying? The thumbs up completely confused me. The retreat. Right. He's retreating. This idea of retreating from the world is just like, that's definitely not what he's saying at all. And I honestly don't even understand where that comes from entirely. Well, like, I would love to actually talk with someone who thinks that.
To kind of Iron Man, Steel Man, the other side here. One reason it comes from is because they're looking at monasteries as we conceive of them now, which is like this tiny little group of men out in the countryside who just spend all their days praying and tending sheep, right? And you go to them when you want to go do a church retreat and get away from things, like a little religious vacation, as it were. So like, admittedly, the moment you hear monastery, you might think of that. But for one thing, that's kind of silly, because oftentimes those monasteries do have some kind of active participation. And then historically, that's absolutely the case. Whole towns have sprung up around monasteries throughout the Middle Ages. Many of the biggest towns you know of in Europe started that way. So yeah, it's still a completely facetious argument, but
yeah, I guess because the retreat idea, I think that's a spell that's been cast over Christians' minds in order to prevent them from actually being the church as the church is supposed to be. Because like, I just want to, like, if you try to break that down, it sounds like one of those things that you say that sound good, and then the more you try to think about it, it kind of just, fritters away, like trying to eat or like cotton candy or something, where it's just like, oh, there's nothing there. Because like, when you say retreat, like, so obviously a monastery is a retreat from the society around it. Like, is it though? Like, how is that obvious that's a retreat? So you're saying, so is basically committing to any kind of community a retreat then? Because that's where my mind goes, because the monastics did not retreat. Now there are some, like the Desert Fathers, right? It's, and different ones who, like, they literally did retreat, right? Like, they go to a cave And then they live out there, and they just don't want to be around anybody, right? And actually, one of the issues where the monasteries came from in there is that people would follow them out there to say like, oh wow, you're doing this cool committed thing, I want to do that too. And then eventually all these people come around them where they're trying to get away from everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they have to create rules and make a community and all this stuff, right? So even their retreating kind of fails. Not, I mean, they're retreating from the world, yes, but like retreating, it's not like retreating from everybody, first of all. But then most of those communities were very much, like you were saying, part of the surrounding community too. Lots of things built up around those. They had commerce. They would trade and help with different people. It wasn't like you couldn't talk to them, like and even in current monasteries, a lot of those, it's not like they just stay behind the walls and they never walk out into society and ever talk to anybody, right?
Like they gotta go to groceries too.
Yeah. So like my question is like, how, let's just say like the monastery that you're thinking of that is a retreat from society, right? How is that monastery more of a retreat from society than your typical nuclear family, right? And like what points that's different in their life would you say is retreating versus the nuclear family? Because I'll tell you, like the nuclear family, they stay in their house a lot. Like they spend a lot of time together, separate from everybody else, right? And then people will come and visit them, right? Oh, they have visit. Well, those monasteries often have visitors. People will come and spend time with them too. Like, oh well, they do stuff. They go out and they shop and stuff. Well, guess what? The monasteries do too. They go out and shop too. They're a little bit more self-sustaining, right? So you're saying, okay, so maybe they're too self-sustaining, right? Well, okay, now let's look at the example of like homesteaders, right? There's a big movement of homesteaders who want to, be self-sustaining on their properties and do all this stuff. And so are they trying to retreat from the world, because, you don't criticize them and be like, oh, wow, that's retreating from the world. You're kind of separating yourself from the economic system, nobody says that. But so like that, I would, and like, I'm genuinely confused about this. Like, I feel like there maybe could be there's probably a more intelligent response than I'm giving credit for here of what that retreating looks like. I've never really heard it. I would love to sit down with someone who's a more anti this and explain, well, this is why it's retreating,
we can have you on the podcast.
Yeah. But I again, like, I just started thinking about it, like, what does that, it just feels like a phrase that you say to like lampoon something that doesn't really hold a lot of water when you try to poke at it and figure out what that is. As far as I can tell, I think it just means like, oh, you just do more Christian stuff. That's retreating.
Yeah.
You spend a little bit more dedicated time praying, and you don't go to football games as much and all that kind of stuff. So you can't, like, really, that's, I don't think that's a bad thing, like you didn't watch the latest, Game of Thrones show. You're really retreating from the world. They're like, well, maybe I'm a little better off for it. Like, I don't, like, it's, and I feel like that now, maybe 20 years ago, or even more, 30 years ago or something, that criticism felt like it had more power because society was more homogenous. Everyone watched the same TV shows. Everybody had the same news. There was only a couple channels that you got your news from. There's only, there wasn't social media. There wasn't YouTube, and everybody was their own publisher and all this kind of stuff, right? So there was a little bit more of monoculture involved, but now it's so fractured. And that you get to be part of all your different subgroups and stuff, and kind of choose who you relate to and who you don't, and all of that, what shows you watch and what shows you don't watch. Then it feels a lot more like, how can you say that that's bad? It's just, we're saying do the Christian thing, it's the Christian subculture in the culture, because there's so many different subcultures now.
Yeah.
And so everybody else actually thinks creating your own little culture is worthwhile and important. You know, like that you have your own community and you find your tribe and all this kind of stuff, right? And I'm just talking about everyone else in the secular world. Like,
Right.
this idea is just so prevalent everywhere. Everyone thinks that that's a good thing. And yet a bunch of Christians are like, you know, still stuck in the 90s, and they talk about it and they're like, oh, don't retreat from the world. It's like, I think you're the 90s called and want their Christian Christianity back, you know, like they we're in a completely different situation now. I would argue even back then it wasn't a good argument, but now it just seems like such a laughably hollow argument to be making when so many other culture, you know, that everyone else recognizes you should be part of other cultures. We're saying you should make Christianity your main culture. Your church should be your main culture, and it should, you know, it should demand way more of you than whatever the subreddit is that you're moderating or something, you know, like, and yeah, if you're in the mode of thinking that's a retreat, I think you need to re-examine the scriptures and the New Testament, because that is, and the early church, because that's never been a problem. Now, you know, the other flip side of that is, okay, but, you know, are we not going to be able to witness enough, and, you know, and all that? And it's just, it's not again, that it's just a false dichotomy thing of, absolutely, if you read a lot of different historians, you know, there's a huge case to be made that the early monastics preserved society and helped convert a lot of pagan society to Christianity by being in monasteries, right? So why did their retreat from the world back then not result in Christianity shrinking? But the generally understood idea is that it didn't result in Christianity shrinking. It resulted in Christianity being preserved and spreading. So why would that be different today? That's the question that you need to ask yourself.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that there's this idea of going out missionally, right, to other people. But as Christians, to be the kingdom of God, we're called to invite people in. So if you're going out and spreading the gospel and spreading the word, that's wonderful, but it needs to be coming from a foundation and a place that you can actually then call people to commit and join the body of Christ. And so it's much, it almost seems like there is this kind of counterintuitive thing, but it's when it's sort of like a Stephen Covey thing of working on your circle of concern versus circle of influence, where Covey talks about your circle of concern is all the stuff that you care about. Your circle of influence is the things that you can actually change, right? And you can think of it as a Venn diagram where the influence is smaller and then the circle is the bigger one outside, right? And if you spend a lot of time thinking about the circle of concern where you don't have influence and worrying about it, and your actually influence will shrink and shrink and shrink because you're just focusing on this thing that you can't do anything about. But he says if you turn your attention to the circle of influence, that will eventually grow and grow and grow because you're focusing on what I can do. And eventually that circle gets bigger. And so there's that kind of counterintuitive thing of like, you feel scared and worried about all these other things outside that you can't do anything about. So you are tempted to put all your energy there, but that's not effective. It's the same, I feel, with the church, which is like, oh, I want to go and spread that gospel out and put all my energy there. But are you looking at home? Are you looking at the community that you're a part of? Are you putting energy into building up the body of Christ where you are? And if you're not putting if you put most of your energy there and focus, you might think, oh no, the gospel's not going to get out, but it will. Historically, it's shown it has. And it's that same, perhaps a little bit of a paradox where you focus on the circle of influence, it grows bigger and encompasses more of the circle of concern.
Yeah. I think part of the reason is because people intuitively know that there's something very immediate and practical that they can do on this, and that is pull their kids out of public school. Right?
Yeah.
But my response to that is, has that worked? Is the new generation more Christian than the last? Or are they going the opposite direction?
What worked? Pulling them out of school or
no,
keeping them?
I mean, keeping them in school. Send your kids out to evangelize other children, right? The Children's Crusade idea. Well, first of all, if you go look at the actual Children's Crusade that happened in the Middle Ages, that did not end well. And secondly, it definitely doesn't seem to be ending well right now. So just raw statistics. Does it seem like that's having an effect? No. Okay. So what do you think you should do about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, well, to end on a happier note, though, Rod Dreher, if you're watching this video, we would love to have you on the podcast. Really, we would love to pick your brain about a lot of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about your new book, too, about re-enchantment. That sounds really fun. I haven't gotten to it yet, but that definitely sounds really fun.
Is that book actually out? I need to
it's coming out. It's either out or it's coming out. So yeah, I want to read that.
Living in Wonder, I think is
that's what it's called.
Yeah. But just to wrap up, we really like Benedict Option. It's been really neat. I've had in my Twitter bio says taking the Benedict Option since 1991, which is when the community was started. So like a little fun little joke of, well, we've been doing this before there was a term for Benedict Option, but big fans, and I highly recommend reading it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, good thumbs up there.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, thumbs up. There we go. It only works if I'm not trying to make a thumbs up.
I don't get it. All right, if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe.
Thumbs up.
I don't know. It's whatever.
No, the like button is the thumbs
hit the
up
like button that's actually on YouTube, and leave us a comment as well. If you got questions or whatever, we'd be happy to ask about that. And please also share this with anyone. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, you can give us 5 stars. That'd be really fantastic. And I think that's it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for your attention, everyone, and have a blessed day.